So, as you saw by the title of today's video, I'm asking the question, should we transcend, should we get rid of the two terms for the divine, masculine and feminine? That is to say, get rid of these words that describe the holy, the divine, either masculine or feminine. Obviously, this was actually suggested to me, This was actually written to me on one of my posts. Someone replied to this, that my posts are too unbalanced because I only talk about the feminine, I don't talk about the masculine. Without realizing what the masculine or the feminine really is, the person replied without realizing this, that the masculine is just the rational mind and the feminine is the intuitive mind. So what they were suggesting is to get rid of these two words because they're too loaded with preconceptions. But we can't get rid of these words. We can't get rid of this symbology of the masculine and the feminine. And we can't do that because perhaps in our personal unconscious, the divine might show in some form of perhaps a tree or a flame or a geometric shape or a number, which it sometimes does, and it has for centuries and millennia, for hundreds of thousands of years. But in the collective unconscious, in our collective on our collective level of the unconscious, which is shared by all humanity, the feminine, what we call the divine feminine, is very often shown by a figure of a woman, a goddess. So we can't really get rid of that image from our collective unconscious. This is the first problem that we have. Trying to get rid of this, trying to get rid of these loaded words, apparently masculine and feminine, that in our psyche, deep in our collective psyche, the masculine and feminine, the images of these two are very well rooted, and you can't just get rid of them and suddenly have them genderless. Or just the images of the divine, just in rational terms, or some kind of object or some kind of flame, which they're also represented in that way too. But the images of the feminine, some of the oldest images of the feminine, of the intuitive mind, are women. And some of the oldest images of the masculine, the rational mind, are male. Of course, there are images of the intuitive mind, of the feminine male as well. We get perhaps one of the best known in ancient Greek or classic Greek tradition, Mercury. He's the god that mediates between God and people. That's what the feminine does. It is the relationship. It is the door, the mystic door between the two dimensions, between the dimensions of the gods, the spirit, and the dimensions of humanity and society. In ancient Egypt, we have the image of Horus, the hawk-headed god. He's the child of Isis and Osiris. Osiris being the god of the underworld, and Isis goddess of the upper world, of the world of the humans. So he's the one that mediates between the two. Or the psychopomp, the one that leads the souls of the dead into the underworld in ancient Egyptian tradition, is the dog-headed Anubis. So there's another male image. But prior to these images, where the male takes over the role of the feminine, are the images of the goddess, of women. And one of the oldest images of this is women, and combination between women and bird. Yeah. So these images, you can't just get rid of these terms, feminine and masculine, just to be politically correct. Okay, because these things are still alive, deeply, deeply within our psyche. These things still live. The mythology still lives. Prior to the mythology of the goddess, of course, we've got the sacred animals. And one of the oldest is the cave bear. And the cave bear, it is the cave bear for a reason, because the bear lives deep inside the cave. So it lives in the invisible dimension of the spirit, and he lives outside the cave, in the dimension of the outside world of everyday world of light. So he mediates between these two. That's why cave bear were. And there are also other animals. There are hedgehogs that do the same thing, or frogs from the Neolithic. One of the oldest images of the goddess was a frog. because the frog again lives on the water and on land. So water is again the dimension of the invisible dimension of the spirit, the underworld, and the land is the visible world of everyday life. So does the bird, especially the water bird. Yeah. Now I've responded to this, to someone suggesting that we need to transcend the terms feminine and masculine, and I wrote a post, a little essay about this. Let me have a look at the time. And I'll share this essay with you now. I'll stop at certain places and just rather than just reading all the time, I'll talk to you as well. So the essay starts. Someone suggested that we need to transcend the terms feminine and masculine. Yeah. Why? Because they are too loaded with preconceptions, and instead just use expressions such as center or living in the moment and now for this sought after mystic experience of the mystery that supports the universe and enlivens all life. So someone suggested that you shouldn't use the words feminine and masculine. They're too loaded, with too many preconceptions, and you should use abstract images like center or living in the now and so on. Yeah. So I'm responding, yes, the feminine is living from the center, from this invisible ground of being, from the now, and many other such genderless names. But the problem of recovering of the feminine, the feeling heart, I should say, the intuitive soul, goes much deeper than just calling it by a politically correct name, like I was explaining to you. It goes deeper because it is of the nature of the collective unconscious. The images associated with the feminine, which some of the oldest images I told you are women. Intuitive mind is associated with women, rational mind with men. These images of the goddesses, of the ancient times, still live deep inside our psyche. Like I showed you in one of my dreams, where Goddess Isis came to rescue me, or another goddess, I don't know her name, but I call her Goddess Isis because she was ancient Egyptian. And there are other pagan goddesses that showed to me the entrance to the cave and the mysteries of the cave and so on. So, like I've shared in my videos and on my posts, on my book Where We Dream the Single Dream, it's all there if you want to read. So these things live inside of us. I mean, the paintings. Look at the paintings. I didn't know anything about mythology when I was painting all these things. Some of my earliest things, she was already there. So these things live in our collective unconscious. You can't get rid of it. Okay. So, first, if we actually journey all the way beyond the veil of time into ourselves, as I was just saying, into the deeper timeless dimension of the most inward center, the archetypal images found there, both in our personal vision dreams and the collective mythology, are not only holy flame, cosmic tree, water of life, or gold, but because for untold millennia our very first image of this invisible mystery was the great goddess, the cosmic womb out of which everything comes and back to which it returns, the earth, the cosmic womb within which everything is. This archetypal image is of the god as woman. That's right, the great goddess. So this is the first problem of leaving out the feminine from the discussion. What to do with the archetypal experiences in dreams and visions where the divine feminine is still very much alive, both in our deep personal psyche and the collective psyche of humanity, mythology, folklore and legend. That's right. That is really the main problem. Like, I should have gotten the book here so I could show you, but Peter Kingsley, in The Dark Places of Wisdom, in the book, one of my favorite books, he showed clearly that interpreting the poem of Parmenides. Parmenides is known, or is often called, the father of Western shamanism. And what Parmenides wrote in his poem is his journey inward and deeper inward. Why deeper inward? Because to the level of the collective unconscious, not just personal unconscious, but he traveled deeper to the collective unconscious. And in his poem, what he finds at the very center, where he's going, he does not find the image of a holy flame, which, you could, or a tree, or a water of life, or a male image. He finds the goddess. So the divine feminine is very much alive in our collective unconscious, as can be seen, for instance, from the paintings of Italian painter Leonardo da Vinci. That's what I'm thinking of. I was thinking of my nephew Leonardo da Vinci. And he's one of his famous paintings, or we think he's one of his most famous painting, Mona Lisa. There she is. And he did many of such paintings of the feminine, of the divine feminine. We can go to the work, for instance, of Joseph Campbell. Many people, many women still call Joseph Campbell a patriarchal scholar, because he worked with the mythology of the male mythology, of the masculine, of the masculine, of the patriarchy, the mythology of the hero, the male hero, yeah. But in his later years, or really should we say in his last years, before he died, he wrote a famous book, Goddesses, The Mystery of the Feminine Divine. And here is his final work. He's admitting that there, deep inside the collective unconscious of humanity, it's not a male image, or just something which is genderless. It is woman, goddess. There are many varieties of these goddesses. Like I said in my last video, before Yahweh got rid of his wife, suppressed his feminine half, he was married to Asherah. This is the image of the divine feminine. She wasn't sort of, you could say, under his foot as such. He was his equal partner. But then male priests came along and destroyed her sacred groves, and erased her deliberately out of the Bible, out of the Old Testament. So what we have now is just the male image of God the Father, Yahweh. Buddha doesn't have a equal, a woman equal in his mythology. Buddha is it. He's the whole thing. So that's a problem. So Joseph Campbell wrote this famous book, and he was inspired by the work of Maria Gimbutas, the famous Lithuanian archaeologist that discovered these images of these statuettes, these figurines of the goddess all over southeastern Europe, which she called the Old Europe, along the Danube River valleys. These were cultures that were based on the divine feminine, and there was the goddess. She was the whole thing. Men were not oppressed. Men held very important positions in society, not like men are oppressing women now. To this day, women don't get equal pay. They're trying to force women to force the big corporations and government to have equal men, equal women. But these women that are coming into power now, they're not really, incarnation of the feminine. They might be women, sex as women, but they are just as patriarchal as the male colleagues. So these women are all about power and power over and holding on to the old patriarchal idea of stratification, classes. There's the elites at the top and the rest of us at the bottom. Ownership of wealth and goods. That's the core of the patriarchy. The power that holds on to the elite, to the stratification, to the class system, so that the elites at the top can own everything and the rest of us are owned really by the elites. So that hasn't changed that much at all, even if you call it democracy or if you call it feudalism. So anyway, so I diverse now, but just a few bits and bobs for you to say. So Campbell wrote that book, at the end of his lifetime, really, saying that he wished that he came across the work of Maria Gimbutas a lot sooner than he did. He would have wrote more about it. Jung didn't have any access to this work. So Jung's work and mythology, for instance, is all patriarchal mythology. The divine feminine is there, the intuitive mind is there, the creative mind is there. All his work, all his painting, all his creativity and his teaching, is there, that, you have to find the inner self. And once you find the inner self, let the inner self be the guide for the rest of your life. Just live from the center. So that's there. But the image of the goddess, it wasn't really there in his work. And from memory, I remember what he wrote on the grave of his wife, Emma. I think the words said, obedient cup. So, Jung was kind of patriarchal, if you like. So there's lots of, you can't get rid of these images of feminine and the masculine. Of course, in Jungian psychology, depth psychology, male has his own image of the self, the wise old man, and woman has the chthonic mother. He even calls it the chthonic mother, not the wise old woman. But like I said in my previous video, once you have gone to that level and you've recovered your inner self, the inner self with further work, the inner self will not, the deity image within you, deep within you, will not just have its face, it will eventually have your face because you're looking for yourself. Anyway, what's the time? 17. Okay, we've got a few minutes. I'll read a little more. So, now, the second problem with leaving out the feminine, terms feminine and masculine, is this. To actually heal a wounded world, we must understand the psychological difference between the two. The archetypal feminine and the archetypal masculine. Okay. Why? Because without this knowledge, we cannot understand why our world is in such a mess. That is, why we are still living according to a masculine myth, which is denying and suppressing the feminine, the soul. And the answer is this, that both the creation myth and the myth of the fall in the Garden of Eden are still the roots of the three patriarchal religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam, which are the underlying story base of our Western culture and which our Western culture still lives by. That's right. Like I said in my previous video, the roots of our society are based on this, on this myth, which was falsely created to suppress the goddess, to suppress women, deliberately suppress the women. the myth of the fall on the Garden of Eden. So we have to understand the difference between the masculine and the feminine. The masculine, is being the rational mind. It creates these divisions between us and even gender divisions between masculine and the feminine, with women and men. The feminine, on the other hand, or like it's created this deliberately, this myth of the fall to keep the women under control, because it shows that it was women's fault that we are exiled here on earth. Again, it's creating the division that the heaven and earth are different, separate, that heaven is somewhere out there in the sky, and here on earth we are in exile, in pain and suffering, not realizing that here on earth this is it. You are it, you're divine, and you're already in paradise. But it's a different psychological, it's a different way of thinking, completely different way of living, to understand this. So, and the feminine, the feminine mind, or the intuitive mind, sees everything in wholes. It interconnects everything. If you have ever worked in an intuitive way, you will realize that the intuition, it links everything. Or this is associated with this, and this is associated with this, and this is associated with this. You kind of make connections, intuitive connections to everything. And if you were to keep going this way, you would realize that everything is interconnected. There are no gaps. The masculine separates and divides you and me, them and us, women and men, masculine and feminine. The feminine sees everything as an interconnection, as a whole, as an interweb, like a huge internet where everything is just single reality in which we participate. Okay? So that's a really important thing to understand. There's a huge difference, and that's why the feminine was suppressed, or it still is suppressed. Because if you see this interconnectedness, that everything is just single unity, oneness in diversity, you cannot have power over things, because they're equal to you then. But if you divide things, I am better than you, then you have power over, and you build this perception in society, then you can have power over others. So masculine is your power over, the feminine is power with. I'm running out of time. What do we now? I'm running out of time. Only got a few minutes left. So I will post this post for you to read. It goes on for quite a while. It's a long essay. It's 2 or 3 pages long essay. I'm not going to read the whole thing. So to summarize, should we get rid of these politically incorrect terms, masculine and feminine? No, we can't, because the archetypal feminine still lives deep inside a collective psyche. So does the archetypal masculine. The archetypal feminine is the great goddess, for instance. From our times of Paleolithic to the Neolithic. Later, in the classical Greek and in our pagan tradition, the two tried to marry, but it was never an equal marriage. The masculine, the male, was always the overlord, and she had to submit to him. Even though there were goddesses there and they played an important part, they were never equal to the male gods, to the master male god, for instance, like Zeus. Yeah, in ancient, in classic Greece. So, there are going to be people like that will criticize you for this and the other, and you don't use these terms, but you have to, because these things still live, they're still alive within us. Okay? So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today, and I'll see you on the next one.